The Ottoman Empire, which ruled across 3 continents and the Balkans in Southeast Europe, Arabia and Central Asia, and coastal northern Africa for 623 years between 1299 and 1922, was one of the biggest and longest-lasting empires in history. The Ottoman Empire was founded on slavery, just like many other empires that came before it. However, in contrast to most instances, slaves under the Ottoman Empire were white. Even after late 19th century attempts at abolition, the Ottoman slave trade continued for the duration of the empire. Slaves were taken as slaves during war raids or politically motivated expeditions directed by the Sultan, especially during the early centuries of the empire, across southern and eastern Europe, the Balkans and the Caucasus, with a large percentage being shipped to the capital Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. Later, from the 16th to 19th centuries, hundreds of thousands of Europeans were captured by barbarian pirates and sold as slaves to the Ottoman Empire. At its height, Constantinople had a slave population of about 1 in 5 citizens, equivalent to the Roman Empire the Ottomans succeeded. This is the largest instance of white slavery in history. However, less research has been done on it than on the slave trade in Africa and America. Slave types. Similar to the infamous Christian crusades led by kings like Richard the Lionheart, who traveled across Europe to convert people to Christianity and conquer their land, the Ottoman Empire did much the same but was Muslim-led and instead captured Eastern Europeans and young Christian boys to convert them and enlist them in a specialized branch of the Ottoman army known as the Janissaries. More on them later. And although religion and vengeance played their part, it was also possible that we can at least conclude that we are all equally horrible. We cannot verify the accuracy of these accounts. They are told through the eyes of people who did not experience the empire firsthand and who have many cultural biases in their reporting because the majority of sources on slavery in the Ottoman Empire come from white Christians, Western Europeans, and those removed from the actual empire's existence. We gain some unique insights into how slavery was perceived by the Ottomans themselves from the scant chronicles from within the empire. Ottoman compassion for slaves. It's crucial to understand that Muslims had a different perspective on slavery than other cultures and religions who participated in the slave trade. The Quran teaches that slaves are of similar moral standing to their masters but have lesser legal position and are not legally distinguishable by their skin color. It also supports manumission or the freeing of slaves who have demonstrated their loyalty. Slave jobs. Despite this, people from sub-Saharan Africa who have disabilities and darker skin tones are frequently sold for far less than their fit, healthy, and white colleagues. All Ottoman slaves were expensive, mainly held by high-ranking officials who paid the most for young, healthy lads and virgin European ladies between the ages of 13 and 25. Despite their exorbitant cost, court documents have revealed that slave ownership was ubiquitous in Ottoman society, and that they were used for domestic chores, agriculture, trade, the military, or coerced into sexual slavery. In contrast to their African counterparts, who typically handled the more basic jobs, white women held responsibilities in the home, taking care of the ladies of the house and overseeing more profile tasks around the house. The males frequently worked as farmhands or laborers in the meanwhile. Domestic and labor slaves may take advantage of their time in slavery to socially organize themselves because they rarely remained in servitude their entire lives. More court records reveal that people in the Ottoman Empire adhered to certain Islamic principles on slavery and that they frequently emancipated their slaves before the death of their masters or even before. Most moved up the ladder in their line of work to become foremen or overseers, where they would become slaves with contracts, clients of their former masters, and receive wages. Much experienced slavery for about 7 years if they were black and 9 years if they were white to prove their loyalty before they were freed. These recently emancipated slaves were often integrated into Ottoman society freely and readily, especially in smaller cities, according to evidence from Sharia court records. They also had a high degree of economic and social independence. Now, since slavery generally isn't dark enough, let's discuss the darkest aspects of slavery in the Ottoman Empire. The trade in sexual slaves. Young girls abducted during war raids or sold to slavery by their poor families make up the first category of the Ottoman Empire's sexual slave trade, along with those who lived in the harem. Even though they frequently lived in a harem and were expected to be openly sexually available to their male lord, the less fortunate female sex slaves did enjoy some privileges not granted to other slave women. Good for them. If a harem slave became pregnant, she could not be sold into new servitude and would be set free upon the death of her lord. Additionally, any child born to the slave would be free and could not be sold or given away. Although they typically worked in coffee shops or bathhouses, young boys were also the victims of sexual slavery. Although many were tragically sold out of desperation and poverty, even more were sold to utilize the upward social mobility that came with a position as a sex slave, especially if you managed to secure a position in the imperial harem. This may seem strange to modern sensibilities, but being sold into sexual slavery wasn't necessarily considered a bad thing. The majority of literature on the imperial harem is sensationalist works with significant amounts of exaggeration and no evidence of the veracity of the stories they tell, especially when written by Western authors. This is because many Ottoman citizens themselves were unaware of what was happening inside the imperial harem, since everyone inside was kept apart from society and sworn to secrecy regarding its secrets. The concubines or slaves within the imperial harem used their status to advance socially and frequently had more freedom and luxuries than many free individuals. They enjoyed positions of authority, the opportunity to marry a high-ranking official or perhaps one of the sultan's wives, and were protected round the clock by powerful black slaves. However, they remained slaves even if they had a lot of political influence, especially between the years 1533 and 1636. However, they might be made to submit to the males around them whenever they wanted and without a choice in which suitor they would choose. Few harem slaves were ever released from their concubine positions, according to the scant information available. Ottoman army's elite. Let's travel back to the 14th century and the young boys who were janissaries, a part of the Ottoman military. After conflicts, young boys were taken as janissaries and incorporated into the elite Ottoman army. According to Islamic law, which dates back to the 3rd Sultan Murad I, who thought that humans were a legitimate component of this booty, the Sultan is entitled to 1/5 of the spoils of war. Their taking was justified by the Sultan. The boys were brutally circumcised, forced to adhere to Islam, and inducted into a strict regiment of slave soldiers after being captured. There, they were subjected to harsh discipline and developed into highly skilled elite soldiers. The janissaries were supposed to display total and utter loyalty to the emperor and were barred from growing beards or getting married before turning 40. In the final centuries of the empire, they were paid, given assistance in battle, and were one of the first regiments to get training in the use of guns. In some instances, parents even offered to pay officials to take their kids to raise their socio-economic standing. By the 1600s, there were more males needed for janissary troops than could be drafted. Therefore, freeborn Muslims were allowed to enlist and take advantage of the opportunity to advance their socio-economic standing. Although it was not planned, white slavery under the Ottoman Empire is not as clear-cut as it may be in other places and eras. Even though our knowledge of slavery and how slaves were treated in the empire is insufficient due to a paucity of sources, the picture it presents is complex and not entirely negative, unlike in the case of the transatlantic slave trade. That's it for today's video. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment on what video you want to watch next. And if you've enjoyed the part about janissaries, make sure to watch this video to learn more about samurais.